A very good afternoon to everyone. Am I audible?
Loud and clear, madam. Loud and clear.
Right. A very good afternoon to the esteemed faculty of AIOS, delegates, and the member of scientific committee. I would like to thank from the entire uh, uh, instructor course co-instructors for giving us opportunity to speak on a topic on pediatric uh, trauma. Is my presentation visible?
Yes, madam. It's visible.
So the topic is the horizon of pediatric ocular trauma and ophthalmic and psychosocial panorama. The course has been outlined in the following headlines. I'll be speaking on the epidemiological pattern and the horizon of clinical profile in cases of ocular injuries in children. So, ocular trauma is one of the most common cause of acquired blindness in children. The consequences of ocular trauma leads to permanent blindness and visual handicap. And the visual and impairment in children leads to greater impact on quality of life in as comparatively the ocular trauma happening in the older age. Because of this, the pediatric age group is associated with the more emotional stress and frequent hospital visit and economic burden. The eye trauma can be devastating to a child and challenging to the ophthalmic surgeon and pediatrician also. The challenge is faced not only by the children but the parents as well. The treatment is like a long-term comprehensive management by the ophthalmologist, pediatrician, and psychologist is required to enable the overall growth of the child's physical, ocular, and mental growth of the child having ocular trauma. Aim of this course will be to cover the principle of on management of ocular trauma in the children, specific to the etiology and psychological social impact on the children's health. There is a variability in epidemiological pattern on the childhood ocular trauma. The eye injuries are comprising of 8 to 14% of total childhood injuries. Injuries in boys are more compared to girls. Whatever studies have occurred all over the world in various countries, it has been found that in the males, boys, they are often encountered with the ocular pediatric trauma because of the more associated with the more outward and their extrovert nature. The children less than 3 years of age are mostly found to have handler-related injuries, which are fingernails-associated injuries. There are high incidence of severe eye injuries seen in children less than 12 years of age. And it has been found that uniocular injuries are more common than the binocular injuries. There is one study done by Dr. Rohit Saxena, which has been associated with the pattern of pediatric ocular trauma in India. It has been seen that in India, pediatric ocular trauma is more common in rural areas, and it has been known to occur in more with the lower socio-economic status. In younger age group, it has also been seen that the younger age group children are more exposed to the ocular trauma, which occurs during casual play. And in older children, it is seen in participating in the organized sports. Another studies which has been done in the northern India, the results revealed as if like about 67.8% patients had presented with closed globe injuries, and 32.2 patients were found to have open globe injuries. It means that blunt trauma is more common in pediatric age group. This is blunt trauma is more common in both the age group, in pediatric as well as in adult ocular trauma, also seen that closed globe injuries are more common. Among closed globe injuries, adnexal injuries are the commonest, followed by the subconjunctival hemorrhages and corneal abrasions. And in open globe rupture, the corneal perforation with or without uveal tissue prolapse was the commonest, followed by the traumatic cataract. Based on similar study, they found another thing that the male to female ratio was approximately 3:1. Male were more found to have the ocular trauma, and the age group was also between 2 to 6 years of age, where the maximum incidence of injuries were found. A big trial, UK pediatric ocular trauma study, that is POT1 and POT2, were conducted a survey-based studies in United Kingdom. It was associated with POT1 was associated with the development of a global standardized protocol for prospective data collection in pediatric ocular trauma, and POT2 was associated with demographic and mechanism of injuries found in the pediatric age group having ocular trauma. So according to these studies, it was found that poor visual outcome was seen in children with posterior segment trauma. Then visual acuity suggests the extent of damage to the ocular structure. Timely referral and management can help to prevent blindness, and follow-ups of children are important for treating complications. The POT3 suggested it was a prospective observational study of 1 year duration. The BSO unit were developed, which were survey unit. There was a questionnaire, it was a questionnaire-based study. It has found that the trauma was mainly uniocular. In 90% pediatric age group, it could have been preventable. Boys were more exposed, and injuries usually were occurring at home. So the was a very recently done study in United Kingdom. So coming on to my next presentation. The horizon of pediatric ocular trauma. The pediatric ocular trauma differs from adult injuries in terms of mode of injuries. There are evaluations.
Excuse me, ma'am. Your slide is not visible, ma'am. Please share.
Okay. Is this visible now?
Yes, ma'am, you can go on full screen.
So pediatric ocular trauma versus adult ocular trauma. There were certain differences which were found to be associated with pediatric ocular injuries. The mode of injury were different, evaluation challenges associated with the pediatric ocular trauma. There were different management protocol requiring need of general anesthesia and long-term outcomes. So what was the challenges we usually face while dealing with the childhood ocular injuries? The history, poor history. Since small children, the exact history could not be elicited. Then poor cooperation while examination of pediatric age group having trauma. Assessment could be challenging as we need general anesthesia for localizing the exact ocular injuries. And there is always a fear of development of unilateral amblyopia in smaller age group children, the impact of emotional and social development of child, as well as parent equally involved with the child affected. There are recurrent inflammation and maintenance of requirement of optical clarity issues, unpredictability of results, and need difficulty in IL power calculation if there is a traumatic cataract. So these are the few challenges which are associated while dealing childhood ocular injuries. So mechanism of ocular trauma, it may occur by blunt force, which is most common, maybe projectile injury while playing gulli danda and various other games, penetrating injuries such as pellet guns and other small firearm injuries, firecrackers injuries, explosion injuries, chemical burns, and crush injuries. So classification of ocular trauma in pediatric age group, again, will depend mainly based on the ocular trauma score. See, ocular trauma score will be depending upon the initial visual acuity at the time of presentation. There are raw points given to the vision at the time the patient is presented. Then other raw points are given to features such as globe rupture, endophthalmitis, perforating injury, retinal detachment, or RAPD. The raw score sum will be equal to addition of some of the raw points. OTS usually serves to predict visual prognosis after an ocular injury in adults and in pediatric age group as well. A high score suggests good visual outcome, and a low score suggests poor visual outcome. So these are the points given at the time of presentation, and the high raw score will give a better prognosis. There is something known as pediatric ocular trauma score, POTS, which has been suggested by and published by Dr. Mehul Shah and various other ophthalmologists. It is a mathematical model to predict exact visual outcome post-trauma in the children. And there, the amblyopia is also added as an independent factor. Another method of classification of ocular trauma is BETS, which has been conventional, and we have been reading about it since ages. Another way of classifying ocular trauma classification is based on zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3, depending on the amount of laceration from the corneal and limbal site. The clinical profile of pediatric ocular injuries will start from open globe injury, eyelid traumas, anterior segment injuries, posterior segment injuries, and orbital traumas. So open and globe injuries, most common usually is plain simple corneal laceration, maybe shallow laceration, full thickness laceration, and the patient may present with the iris tubular prolapse. These are multiple type. It can be fingernail associated injuries, or any time with the toys, or the child may develop such injuries. Then a child may present with intraocular foreign body in the orbit, or intraocular foreign body. Then the next come to eyelid trauma. This is one of the most common presentations seen in pediatric age group. It starts with the trauma in anterior laminar, in the medial canthus, or maybe canalicular injury, or lateral canthal injuries. So there can be foreign body in the lid. So there are multiple injuries which can be seen in associated with eyelid and periorbital injuries in cases of pediatric age group. Coming on to anterior segment trauma, the corneal abrasions are most commonly found, and they are most easily seen, detected, and treated. The corneal edema occurring because of trauma, blunt trauma, corneal blood staining, hyphema, traumatic cataract, mydriasis, all these variability of various anterior trauma anterior segment trauma related injuries can be found in pediatric age group. The posterior segment trauma also have been Berlin's edema, vitreous hemorrhage after blunt trauma or penetrating injuries, retinal detachment, choroidal rupture, multiple multiple posterior segment associated injuries can also be seen. The orbital injuries in children in cases of blowout fracture, then white eye blowout fracture where the eye remains quiet but there is diplopia and blowout fracture in the children, then traumatic optic neuropathy, chemical injuries, very common in children following the glue, then glue injuries and then lime injuries, alkali burn, acid burns. The more important two kind of injuries which are exclusively seen in children is birth trauma related eye injuries, which is occurring after difficult labors, forceps injury or vacuum injury. Child may present with corneal stria, which are vertical and lead to poor visual prognosis. They can be corneal hydrops, facial nerve palsy, ocular motor, multiple nerve palsy may also occur because of forceps or induced vacuum injuries. The another form which occurs only in the pediatric age group of it is chicken baby syndrome or seen in child abuse, which was noted in year 1980s, which the paper was published where there were multiple ocular injuries was seen associated in the child abuse cases, and the age group mainly is less than 3 years, more commonly in smaller babies less than 1 year of age, which have come in the in the OPD with presentation of head injuries associated with retinal hemorrhage. So ocular finding will predominate with the findings of retinal hemorrhage, choroidal folds, hemorrhagic macular cyst, and here the prognosis is very bad and visual prognosis, child may become amblyopic afterwards if not treated. Here the comprehensive management by pediatrician and ophthalmologist is required to treat the child. So carry home message by seeing the clinical profile of ocular trauma that it can be preventable in as many as 90% of cases if improved recognition of stress factor for ocular injury and target intervention is done on time, and use of appropriate eye protection and under supervision for children engaging in high risk activities must be advocated. In times of COVID pandemic, another challenge is to do primary treatment to avoid long-term blinding complication. It should also be taken into consideration.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you for your presentation.
Yes.
Yes,
Now I would request next speaker to please join here and take on the presentation.
So, do we invite Dr. Parihar?
Yes, sir. Next speaker is Dr. Parihar, sir.
Parihar, sir, if you can please share your screen and we can start with your presentation.
Sir, if in case sir is busy, we can request.
I've done it. I've done it. Am I go through with this presentation, Jaya?
Yes, sir, if you can put it on full screen, and even if you can be a little louder.
Just 1 minute, just 1 minute. Can you hear me now?
Oh, wow, Dr. Parihar, this is lovely.
Yeah, I was using mask because I am in OPD. Anyhow, yeah, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I congratulate and acknowledge my gratitude to Professor Jaya for conducting this instruction course and allow me to present my views on pediatric corneal and scleral injuries, what principles and practice we should use. There are multiple slides, and previous two presentations have covered a lot of out of these slides. So I'll go quickly to avoid any duplication. As it is mentioned, the leading cause of ocular morbidity is anterior segment trauma, and pathogenic mechanisms, primary management principles, long-term reconstructive and rehabilitative strategies are essential to achieve anatomic and visual outcome in these cases. And this is a general guidelines how to evaluate a patient. A proper history and a good examination needless to be stressed in any of the science of medicine and art of medicine, more so in cases of pediatric cases and in ocular trauma cases. Now, what we are going to see is the first group is the non-perforating corneal and ocular surface injuries. These are very common. We all know about the corneal foreign bodies, how it is to be managed. So this can be detected by simply by a torch and loop examinations. The patient comes with the history that he is having little discomfort in eye for the last 4 days, no congestion, nothing. But if you see carefully, there may be a corneal foreign body, particularly in cases of contact lens wearer or those who are going on bike without any protective devices, which is very common in rural area in our country. Foreign bodies, if how to handle it, is basically you need to remove it, and basic principle that to keep yourself away from the direction of the pupil, to remove it and manage it as a 5 cardinal principles as it is given in the Parsons book, not in the Parsonal here. To manage a corneal ulcer, that goes. Corneal aberrations are the again it is the same way it has to be handled. Whenever there is a aberration, one must suspect infections, and generally we don't observe for the cultures, etc. But in particularly in the pediatric cases, it is very essential to be more precise while using the antibiotic after the initial broad spectrum, because roadside or domestics and the formers related to pediatric trauma, the chances of fungal contamination and fungal infections are very high. Hence, the culture is very important to take a call on it. This is all basic principles. We all being it's an ophthalmic forum, so it is for the sake of the slides are being kept here, but we all are aware how to handle a corneal aberrations. This is very important. The chemical injuries, it has a very wide spectrum, right from this is alkalis, acid burn, battery waters, etc. At home, it is a soda water which can give rise to these chemical injuries, and particularly in North India, this if parents are using pan or this taking tobacco with tuna, the calcium, those gives a very severe kind of the chemical injuries if it is not handled immediately with the copious water, ringer lactate or any other available fluid. So then can lead to the severe kind of changes in the conjunctiva and the cornea, and very severe dryness of the eyes may take place. Corneal blood staining, again, this is a sort of a injury. If hyphema is not handled in the time, can remain there for more than 5 days. The corneal endothelial cells may be stained, and subsequently this can be the cause of the chronic subacute endothelitis, which can be very difficult to handle when the child grows in the age. Now come to the penetrating trauma. The corneoscleral lacerations are very common. Again, these in domestic fields you may see with the sharp objects like the scissors, knife, etc. handled by the child, or accidental injuries. Sometimes with the pencil. It's a very lead pencils are also can lead to the penetrating trauma. Then the gulli danda, as it is mentioned by the Professor Jaya, are the common objects which see, and initial intervention is to see the integrity of the globe is maintained. And secondary globe is always if there is a cataract is there or the vitreous is disturbances, so a proper meticulous surgical pro forma has to be adopted and handled it. Now the difference between the pediatric and adult trauma is that in the pediatric cases, though you may you may achieve a anatomical integrity of the globe, but the dense amblyopia because of deprivation of vision due to injury and subsequent period of the management can lead to be irreversible blindness, and again that has a socio-economic associated problem in the future. So the surgical preparations, etc., it is not only the surgery, but you have to plan for a subsequent the post-surgical management, how you can go ahead with these situations. If there is a small lesions are there which can be watertight, but if it is required and you don't want to do the suturings less than 3 millimeters, then the cyanoacrylate tissue adhesive can also be used in these cases. The basic principle of handling the corneal suturing is to restore the integrity of the corneal contour. The first you start, if it is from the limbus, it has to be start from the make the limbus corrected, and then you give sutures to maintain the corneal curvature. Sometimes you have to remove sutures. This can be as stay sutures, and see that you are able to make the proper IUL these things. It is very important in pediatric cases how to handle the intraocular lens implants. For any child less than 1 year, if he has an injury, I would recommend that initially we can hold on the IUL implantation, and they can be given the contact lenses for some time, because if any eye less than 1 year, there is a post-operative fibrosis, inflammation is very high. Second, the eye is growing. So if you put a IOL at this stage, probably the chances of amblyopia are much more rather than using the contact lens. So any surgery after 3 years when you are performing, initially it is a post-operative refractions will be towards on the hyperopic side, and gradually it goes on the myopic. So by all means in these cases, we should not plan to think of the multifocal IOL using in these situations. I think I can stop it here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor, uh, for your presentation. Now we would request our next speaker to please join in. Doctor, could you please mute your mic? Can we have Dr. Piyush Chaturvedi?
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are.
And my slides is also visible?
Yes, doctor. You're good to go.
Very good afternoon to you all. And to start with, it will not be an exaggeration to say that the management of the chemical ocular injuries in pediatric age group is a real workout. As far as management of it is concerned, the large number of treatment modalities may need to be involved in it. Not only anterior segment apornia, but also pediatric glaucoma, vitreoretina, and even active participation of anesthesia and critical care. The pediatrician, immunologist, and rheumatologist all may have to chip in for the final and to get a better and final outcome. As far as approach for the assessing of the chemical injuries particularly in the emergency room is concerned, we have to go for the four-pronged approach. First of all is to ascertain whether it's a chemical injury. As children are aware, a poor history tellers, as it has already been brought by Dr. Jaya very well. Then to observe any other associated collateral injuries which may skip our attention and may be critical, like airway and head and neck. Assess the ocular involvement. This assessment is just a visual assessment, so as to we have to quickly assess and decide, as time is very imperative and critical. The type of injury in it. what type of chemical, either alkali or acid. As theory goes, the alkali injuries are considered to be severe. However, the data has and the studies have come out, there is no much difference between the alkali as well as acid injuries as far as outcome as well as prognosis is concerned. In the emergency management, the removal of the corrosive agent comes the foremost. As the chemical interacts with the tissue, the proteins break down, low molecular weight fragments do come in, and they act like chemoattractants, and they also play a part of the inflammatory mediators. Irrigation, therefore, is the foremost. It has to be done within seconds with a copious amount of irrigation. 2 to 8 liters is written out here, but further can also be required. It all depends upon how the pH is turning on, because we have to keep an eye over it to make it as neutral as possible using litmus papers. And if it is not there, the urine pH strips can also be utilized in these cases. We have got multiple modalities to use. Morgan lens, definitely, it's a very handy device, has also been used in children, and children are also quite comfortable with it. It has been used in the cases as low as 6 months children. However, it's not quite so easily available as far as we are concerned. I have myself not seen this kind of a device ever. So the conventional other way are using IV sets, nasal cannulas, or undines. Those have become quite historic as of now. As far as the mechanism goes, it's very simple. It changes the pH to neutral, but it's not only the surface. It is the anterior chamber pH as well. It removes the chemoattractants, inflammatory mediators, and dilution of the corrosives also do come in. Neutralization may also take place. However, the buffers, if added, does play this neutralization role. Do we really need to select the irrigation fluid? As far as emergency is concerned, there is no question of selecting. Whatever is handy available, it has to be used. Some of the anecdotes have also mentioned milk, which has also been used in the emergency situation. However, in the hospital scenario, we have got an array of irrigating fluids out of which to choose. It has got all do have some advantages and disadvantages. However, as far as clinical scenario goes, dafoterin, which are the polyvalent amphoteric solutions, comes the foremost. However, they are not so easily available. BSS plus, BSS, ringalactate, and normal saline with soda bicarb are also being utilized. Once the child has already been taken into an OR or quite cooperative to get examined, we look for the retained embedded particles. Deliberate look is important as well as the sweeping of the fornices to find any embedded particles which needs to be physically picked up or mechanically scraped. This is the time now to evaluate and classify the injuries. We have to look for the eyelid injuries, the corneal stroma, which in the form of haze or edema, stolophytes, or any thickening or melting. Staining is important as far as corneal surface is concerned. Conjunctiva, which up to the fornices has to be seen, along with the limbus, which is very critical. Limbus shows pale areas or edema, hemorrhages, abruptly terminating necrosis, and abruptly terminating vessels. They all do come under the classification of limbal involvement rather than just a limbal ischemia. It can be classified based on any either Roper Hall classification or Dua's classification. However, in the Dua's classification, this conjunctival involvement does maybe very critical as far as children are concerned, and they have a very small area of conjunctiva as the eyes are small and they are growing, and even a small amount of spillage can involve a large percentage of conjunctiva, and thereby leading to symplepharon formation as well as ocular surface problems. The analog scale is quite unique to Dua's classification, and the grade 4 of Roper Hall has been divided into further subclassified into 3 more subheadings, which can be more very important as far as child chemical injuries are concerned. However, the precise assessment can only be done on the photographs, FA or OCT angiography, which may be feasible in the elder children. The reassessment definitely has to be done at multiple stages. Recurrent examinations has to be carried out, as lingual ischemia takes precedent in classification of the grade. The additional evaluation is involved the AC, lens, retrolental, retina, and even the IOP. The objectives of the treatment will be the control of inflammation, promote epithelial healing, support repair, and prevent complications. The acute injury targets will be inflammation, epithelial defect, limbal ischemia, and collagenolisis. The basic the inflammation, which is being controlled by topical steroids, epithelial defect, which may require surgical intervention like BCL, amniotic membrane grafting, tarsorrhaphy, and even symblepharon rings. Limbal ischemia definitely again requires a majority of the surgical interventions which do help in it, mainly tenoplasty, tenon advancement, amniotic membrane grafting, and conjunctival flaps. However, collagenolisis also to be targeted, which based mainly upon the topical treatment, basically topical citrate, ascorbic acid, even oral ascorbic acid has to be given. Role of tetracyclines is definitely contraindicated in the less than 9 years of age group. IOP also does have to be controlled. As far as the final outcome is concerned, the main outcome depends upon the corneal opacity and the surface irregularities, which later may be surgically controlled. To conclude, the outcome may not parallel as the results. The fast pace of the healing response averages each phase, and we as a ophthalmologist need to keep pace. And generally, the prognosis in these cases are quite poor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Piyush. Now, I would like to take this opportunity to invite our next speaker, Dr. Sanjay Kumar Dhar.
Good afternoon, everyone. Are my slides visible?
Your slide is visible. If you can go full screen, you'll be good to go.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be talking about pediatric blunt ocular trauma management strategies. These causes are already been talked about. We can divide the trauma into non-accidental or accidental. Talking about the non-accidental injuries, it can be because of the child abuse, which have been already talked about, which can result in retinal hemorrhages or other injuries like long bone fractures and all. Coming on to accidental injuries, can be because of the ball direct hit on the eye, or because of the blunt wooden objects, or because of various toys. The blunt trauma gives rise to anterior-posterior compression and expansion of the equatorial plane, which results in transient increase in intraocular pressure and results in ocular damage in the anterior and the posterior segment. The most common injury happening after the blunt trauma is hyphema. Precise cause may not be known because of the child may not be forthcoming in telling the history. And in cases of hyphema, we should always rule out non-traumatic etiology in a child like retinoblastoma, juvenile xanthogranuloma, leukemia, or blood dyscrasias. We would like to take the child for ultrasound, B scan, CT scan, CBC, and complete blood count or coagulation studies to rule out other causes. As far as management is concerned, recording the IOP is difficult in a child, and most of the times the child has to be taken for examination under anesthesia, where intraocular pressure and other related injuries may be recorded. Initially, we may like to keep the child inpatient or admitted if the follow-up is not proper or is not suited. Coming on to medical management of hyphema, it is slightly controversial, but we can give tranexamic acid 25 milligram per kg 8 hourly, basically to stabilize the clot and to prevent the rebleed, which is maximum till 5th day of the injury. We can also give oral corticosteroids in a dose of 0.75 milligram per kg body weight. But the mainstay of the treatment will be to drain the hyphema as early as possible to prevent amblyopia, and because it is difficult to monitor the intraocular pressure in a child, and if we keep on observing the child, it will be difficult to monitor the IOP. So earlier the better. So we would like to remove the hyphema as early as possible. Hyphema may also give rise to late glaucoma, which will be spoken later on. Other injury is iridodialysis. It is basically a disease of the iris from the ciliary body. It can happen from blunt trauma as well as from penetrating injury. A child may present with the squeezing of one of the eyes, and because of the glare and the photophobia, diplopia which the child is experiencing, the pupil may also be D-shaped. So the treatment is surgical, as in adults, it can be done as by Mackennal technique or by scleral technique. There's nothing different as far as children are concerned, but the only thing is the space available inside the anterior chamber will be less and the procedure will be slightly technically difficult. It may result in secondary glaucoma due to angle recession and iridia, for which medical management initially may be thought of, but once it fails, the child may be taken up for TRAB plus TRAB, or DLCP. Coming on to lens injuries are although more common with open globe injuries, but it can still occur with blunt traumas because of the injury with a ball or a stone. It can be associated with a lamellar corneal laceration also. It can be associated with shallow AC, hyphema, corneal puff, iris distortion, dialysis, and PCT. The child should be taken up under anesthesia, examination under anesthesia for the axial length evaluation and the K values. The K values and the axial length are basically important. For the calculation of the IL power, and the IL power is done basically by Sarkey or Halliday 2 formula. And if the axial length is more than 17 and the corneal diameter is more than 10, the child can be taken up for IL implantation. The choice of the power to be taken up for IOL is decided by Dahan and Enyadi. Dahan described that it should be less than, the deduction should be 20% between less than 2 years and 10% between 2 to 8 years. And Enyadi says that the target refraction after surgery plus present age should be equal to 7 years. So this is how we can generally take a guide and put the IOL. So this surgery I'll skip. So lens injury has its own difficulties in the sense that the IOL power calculation may be difficult in younger children for obvious reasons, and in the scenario of an injury, it becomes more difficult. So there are also chances of anisometropia because of the myopic shift in a child, which occurs after the IOL implantation, and the wrong IOL calculation, which can happen because of various reasons. Also, the refractive status of the other eye is to be taken into consideration to avoid anisometropia. The inflammation has been talked about, so you have to keep in mind that the increased inflammation after the surgery should be taken care of. The mainstay of the treatment is not the surgery, but the visual rehabilitation after the surgery, as had already been talked about by Jana Parihar sir. The amblyopia management is very important, and so is the need of regular refraction in a child and regular follow. So there are various other injuries like retinal injuries, vitreous hemorrhage, retinal detachment, and other injuries because of the blunt trauma, which are looked after by the VR surgeon. Orbital injuries can be in the form of isolated fractures, which can result in anophthalmos, extraocular movement restriction, for which we can do CT scan. The point to be noted is that orbital roof fractures are more common in less than 10 years, and orbital floor fractures are more common after the age of 10 years as the child grows. So you can have a globe rupture. We have to do a evisceration, and implant size is important. So is the implant exchange at a later stage to avoid any contracted socket or orbital deformity. I'll skip this. So the challenges are the history, which may not be forthcoming, ocular examination, for which you may have to take child under anesthesia most frequently. Early intervention is better to avoid complications like amblyopia. Visual rehabilitation in the form of repeated refraction and amblyopia management is important. So is the social and emotional impact. The child is not a small adult, so the treatment should be custom made, and not the child should not be undertaken for the same procedure which is done in the adult. So there was a 3-year-old child who sustained injury with all, developed sympathetic ophthalmitis in the other eye, and became blind. And the child was none other than Louis Braille, who developed the Braille language for all the blinds, as we know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sanjay, for finishing the presentation in time. Now, can we invite our next speaker, Dr. Vaibhav Kumar Jain? Dr. Jain, could you please unmute your mic and switch on your camera and start your screen sharing?
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. So my topic is traumatic glaucoma in children. Coming to pediatric epidemiology, pediatric ocular trauma is an important cause of avoidable blindness in children. Uh, Approximately 3 to 5 million children suffer from ocular trauma, and significant number of children require hospitalization to manage these ocular trauma. So coming to incidence of post-traumatic glaucoma, so we don't know exact the incidence of post-traumatic glaucoma. There is one study that has been published in IGO, and it was a retrospective study of around 200 eyes, and they report 15% incidence of post-traumatic rise of intraocular pressure after trauma, and around 1/4 of eyes with closed globe injury require trap to control the intraocular pressure. Also, about 1/5 of pediatric glaucoma is because of trauma. So the magnitude was quite high. And coming to age and gender, it is relatively uncommon in less than 2 years of age. And mean age of presentation is around 10 years. Toys injuries are very common in 2 to 4 years of age group. And it is more common in males due to outdoor exposure. Now coming to types of injury, that is sports accounts for 27% of all pediatric ocular trauma. There is one study that report in India, injury from gilli danda and bow arrow injuries are very common, and they account for around 45% of sports related injuries. Now coming to closed globe injuries are more common than open globe injuries, and the tennis ball injury or firecracker injuries are more common in closed globe injury, whereas stone injury and bow and arrow injury was the cause in open globe injury. There is another study from PGI Chandigarh. They report firecracker was the commonest cause of injury, followed by stone injury. Now coming to risk factors for glaucoma, so there are certain risk factors. The child can develop glaucoma if these are present. So if it is advancing age, lens injury, anterior chamber inflammation, and penetrating ocular injury, if there is a presence of vitreous hemorrhage or intraocular foreign body. There are certain early predictor of traumatic glaucoma, like increased pigmentation of angle, elevated baseline intraocular pressure, if there is a hyphema or lens displacement, or if there is an angle recession in more than 180 degree. Hyphema is a predictor of traumatic glaucoma. It is the commonest cause of traumatic glaucoma, and it is followed by angle recession and lens induced. Hyphema occurs basically because of blunt trauma to the eyeball, and it is the tear in the ciliary face and rupture of arterial arcade along the iris root that causes the hyphema, and there is a clogging of trabecular measure with the inflammatory cells in RBCs. They cause the elevated intraocular pressure. There are chances of rebleed in hyphema. It is due to clot lysis or retraction. Aspirin use may exacerbate the rebleed. And if there is a rebleed, then there are chances of certain complication like raised intraocular pressure, corneal blood staining. There are certain indications for surgical drainage of hyphema. Generally, spontaneous resolution occurs in 95% of patients. If there is a persistent pain or corneal blood staining, if there is a grossly IOP elevation threatening the optic nerve. So in these cases, the surgical drainage of hyphema has to be done immediately. There is another entity that is angle recession glaucoma. In this, glaucoma occurs quite late, maybe years or decade later after the incidence of trauma. It is basically tears in the ciliary body muscles, and angle recession is basically an indicator of previous trauma. Angle recession per se does not cause glaucoma. It is the damage to the trabecular muscle that causes the glaucoma. So all eyes do not develop glaucoma after angle recession, reported series, the various series have been reported 2 to 10% incidence of glaucoma after angle recession. It is more frequent if there is a greater than 180 degree of angle recession, and it is less common if there is a less than 180 degree of angle recession is there. Now, the angle recession is basically a gonioscopy based diagnosis. So you have to do gonioscopy in all cases of blunt trauma after the resolution of hyphema. So what we see is an irregular widening of ciliary body band, and there may be associated other signs of trauma like torn or absent iris processes, posteriorly attached iris root. It has to be compared with the fellow eye, and then we can diagnose it. And there are certain signs like deepening of anterior chamber may be there in the angle recession glaucoma. Now coming to management, they are generally managed with the medical therapy like topical anti-glaucoma drugs are started in the initial phase. Laser trabeculoplasty is an option, but it is generally much less effective. And the close and long follow-up is required in these eye because of there are chances of development of glaucoma. And other eye follow-up is also very essential because there is a risk of developing raised intraocular pressure in the other eye also in the later stage. There is another entity that is ghost cell glaucoma. So very rare children. Generally, khaki colored cells block the trabecular meshwork. It occurs usually 2 to 3 weeks after trauma and vitreous hemorrhage. There's another entity like lens dislocation, anterior posterior dislocation. It also causes glaucoma. Penetrating ocular trauma also disturb the ocular structural alteration and blockage of trabecular meshwork, RBCs and inflammatory cells. They also cause the glaucoma. Now coming to management of traumatic glaucoma, initially we start with the medical management. And the drugs need to be avoided like pilocarpine, it exacerbates the pupillary block. PG analog also need to be avoided as it increases the inflammation. Brimonidine need to be avoided in children. Surgical management depend on the etiology. And at last, glaucoma filtration surgery required if it is inadequately controlled glaucoma after maximal anti-glaucoma medication. Topical mitomycin C is recommended. Failed trap cases or inflammatory glaucoma. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, doctor, for your time, for your presentation. Now we would like to invite our next speaker. May I request Dr. Dogra to please unmute yourself, doctor, and if you can share your screen and we can start with the presentation. Doctor, could you please unmute your mic?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
Now we can hear you loud and clear, sir.
Yes.
And if you can get your presentation in a full screen mode, sir. Right, sir.
Good afternoon, sir, and a very thanks to
Switch on camera, sir, please.
Yeah. His doctor's camera is switched on. I think, Dr. Dogra, you have been logged in 2 different devices.
Is it okay now, sir?
Yeah, no problem, sir. You can start.
Okay. So, what are the unique aspects of trauma in children? So, I'll be discussing sympathetic ocular. About 6 million children annually sustain some form of ocular trauma, and pediatric ocular injuries account for nearly 50%. And the rates of surgical management vary from 7 to over 50% depending on the mechanism of injury. So what are the salient features are that there are about 1.4 million blind children in the world, 2/3 in developing countries, mostly monocular blindness, and ocular trauma is the second most important cause of blindness after amblyopia. So this definition, we are all aware. Here in modern world, maybe granulomatous be a little controversial because in modern sympathetic ophthalmia, it can be non-granulomatous also. Otherwise, the definition remains the same as it was earlier. Hippocrates noticed it almost 2000 years back. 17th and 18th century, people noticed that the disease placed the other eye in great danger, but it was William Mackenzie who coined the term sympathetic ophthalmia in the 19th century, and Ernest Fuchs gave the complete description. Obviously, a rare disease, an incidence of only 0.2 to 0.5% after penetrating trauma, and now, yes, ocular surgery 0.01%. And the incidence is rarer in pediatric, maybe 0.2%. No age, sex, or race predilection. Of course, higher incidence of males in sympathetic ophthalmia because probably the males are more exposed to trauma. And one survey has put almost 2/3 as male. Again, age distribution at young age and older age. Young age because children are more prone for trauma. Older age because more surgeries are done in older age group. So what are the challenges? One is in children, there is unreliable history. Then treatment-wise, potential side effects of systemic steroids and immunosuppressive drugs. Children have a strong immune response. Diverse clinical presentations are possible in sympathetic ophthalmia. And of course, examination of children is always difficult, and literature as far as sympathetic ophthalmia in pediatrics is rare. So this is the mechanism. When you have penetrating trauma, the uveal antigens come out uh, through the conjunctiva or extra the lymph nodes. They ultimately there is a T1 helper cell response hypersensitivity mechanism leading to bilateral panuveitis. So a diagrammatic description how the immune response occurs. These are the possible antigens which are responsible: melanin, retinal S antigen, rhodopsin, interphotoreceptor, and recoverin. The inflammatory mediators are CD4 T cells, target tissues, uvea. Some HLA A11 has also been implicated in this. So in the intact eye, the intraocular antigens bypass the local lymph nodes and circulate directly into the blood and spleen. But once the uveal tissue is exposed to the conjunctival lymphatics, then they move to the lymph nodes and the response occurs. So the features in both the eyes are similar except for the features of trauma in the exciting eye. Granulomatous panuveitis is the most common. All these lymphocytic infiltration, epithelioid cells, absence of necrosis, sparing of retina and choriocapillaries, uveal thickening extends throughout, ciliary and iris body masses are there, retina is detached. Dallin-Fuchs nodules, we are all aware, are there between the Brooks membrane and the RP. And what is their pathological structure? Predominantly epithelioid cells. Onset of symptoms within 3 months 50%, within 6 months 2/3, and within 1 year 90%. 11 years or maybe 5 to 17 years is the common presentation. Similar in both the eyes: blurry vision, pain, epiphoria, photophobia, and other clinical features as in panuveitis, posterior synechia also, vitritis, papillitis, and mid-equatorial dental nodules, exudative RD may be present. We are all aware accommodation is the earliest symptoms, retrolental cells and flare is the earliest sign, IOP may be high or low. So depending on the current and earlier, maybe post-surgical are now gaining in importance, and enucleation no longer is advocated as the first line of treatment. These are the various complications which can occur, and penetrating trauma, surgical repair which is delayed, the use of local and systemic steroids after 1 week, trauma to ciliary body, big trauma more than 5 mm are more likely to cause sympathetic ophthalmitis. So eventual blindness if you don't treat it, These are the various differential diagnoses, VKH, sarcoidosis, lymphomas, and others. Ultrasound is very important. Thickened choroid and vitreous opacity. Fluorescein angiography, multifocal areas of hyperfluorescence, leakage, pooling later on. ICG will give corresponding areas of hypofluorescent. OCT will also show retinal edema, choroidal folds, and even peripapillary edema. So there were very many studies done, and they found the rate of incidence of sympathetic ophthalmia to be 0.24%. Age group was same. Many patients didn't have active AC inflammation also. Most of the patients received steroids, systemic as well as intravenous, and visual acuity was achieved 6 by 20 by 200 in most of the patients. So the preferred line is steroids. Immunosuppressives can also be used. Prognosis earlier was untreatable, but now they are getting good results. And we are all aware it is type of disease, and immunosuppressives and steroids should be taken with long-term follow-up. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for your presentation. I think we all the presentations are being done in this hall as of now. So I think it's time for our panel discussion.
There is one last presentation has been left, the Dr. Parihar's presentation on psychosocial impact.
Yes, Dr. Parihar is giving us two presentations, right? So that's my wrong on my part. My apologies to you, Dr. Parihar.
No issue for you.
Sir, can you please start with your presentation?
Actually, when we thought of panel discussion, we thought there will be an audience. So there is an interaction with the participants and the audience. But unfortunately, that number is very less and no one-to-one discussion is likely to take place. We don't have any guest speaker in this IC. Generally, they put one guest speaker.
No, sir, we do not have any guest speaker. But at the same time, panel discussion, we can do it among ourselves also. We can have doctors asking each other and we can discuss things accordingly.
Yeah. Good afternoon. We have covered a wide spectrum of ocular trauma, but in the pediatric age group, and that is the most important and crucial factor remains the visual rehabilitation in these cases and psychosocial aspects of pediatric ocular trauma, engaging child as well as the family. That's very, very important. As we all know, no parent wants to see their child get hurt, but the sad reality is that tens of thousands of kids sustain eye injuries every year. This we have already discussed. And any visual disability following ocular trauma has significant emotional, psychological, and socio-economic impact, not only on individual, family, as well as on the society as a whole. Almost 20 to 30% of parents and 15 to 25% of children experience persistent traumatic stress reactions that important in functioning, treatment, and recovery period. Why does the child trauma need special attention? That is, first is the tender age and development of the child from a pediatric age group to adulthood. Tender age, tender mind, very sensitive, and deprivation of good vision in the affected eye leading to amblyopia. So these are the nutshell, the reasons which is very, very crucial while handling any childhood trauma. and it is bound to affect his academic, social, physical, mental growth occurred during the childhood and subsequently. Accepting eye injury and living with it, it's a real big trauma. For whole life, he is seeing that he is something different than the other people. And why it is so, these aspects are not so familiar is basically because proper attention has not been given on this particular aspect of the medicine. What is the traumatic stress? The children and parents may have traumatic stress reaction due to injury, serious illness, medical procedures, invasive, frightening treatment experiences, and all these compound to a nightmare for the future life too. And obviously, it will impair the day-to-day functioning, affect adherence to the medical treatment, and optimal recovery pattern that is also affected. Traumatic stress symptoms may vary in different pattern, but by and large, we see that maybe child may be upset or angry, anxious, jumpy, confused, irritable, uncooperative, and feeling empty or numb. These are the risk factors associated with traumatic stress reactions. This lack of positive peer support, which is written the last, I consider is very important in the ultimate recovery pattern. And for the parents, it is very, very important that they experience other life stress or disruptions, lacks positive social support, has had prior emotional or mental health problems, has had previous traumatic experiences. Again, when the child thinks in the hospital can be traumatic to the child, being left alone itself is a big trauma. And then risk of being afraid of dying, seeing an injury to their body. These are the various factors depending upon the child's background and his age will affect his overall well-being. Family may feel that minimize potential traumatic aspects of medical care, identify children and families with or higher risk, persistent, provide anticipatory guidance. So the medical is not only the treatment part, but the counseling of the parents and the children is equally important to handle these situations. These are the persistent traumatic stress factors related avoidance, arousal, and re-experience. These points has to be considered. These are the three key clusters of the symptoms, and psychological response will depend upon the significant distress, agitation, intense feeling of fear, numbing of emotional reactions, mood change, anxiety, sleep conduct, these are appears to be common affair. But for a child per se to feel all these and to understand by the parents and the treating surgeon is very, very important. And this experience depends upon the severity of the trauma. Parents react to the traumatic experience, the proximity of the child to the traumatic experience. This combination is very, very important to feel how to assess distress, pain, fears, worries, grief, loss, and what this is most important, that how to reduce the distress, actively assess and treat pain using your hospital's protocol, provide child with information what is happening about his treatment, his decision when it is possible, listen carefully for child's understanding, and we must understand the child's psychology, ask about fears and worry, provide reassurance and realistic hope. I think this is a key to the success of handling ocular trauma related psychological factors in the pediatric age group for the patient as well as to the family, and for the treating surgeons and paramedical staff, they should also understand these sequence and sequelae are so important for the development of the child. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Parihar. We have time for the panel discussion. So if you would like to discuss on something, doctors, we can do that.
Since everything has become virtual, coordinator is also virtual and we are also virtual. So lunch break will also be virtual. From the Partho side, the picture of the Sandesh will be shown to all of us.
Yes, sir. We are having a virtual bliss here.
Yeah, Brigadier Poninder, would you like to add something with the, since you are in the place and earlier also you have been in Northern Command, about the peculiarity of pediatric trauma in northern sector and in the and eastern part with the high altitudes and other areas?
Uh, Sir, yes, our experience is mostly limited to younger male groups, males, young males, not of pediatrics. But yes, definitely pediatric trauma is much, much more challenging. For example, a simple thing is uh, whenever we have pediatric trauma, we mostly start on steroids. And when do we start on IV steroids? When do we start on immunosuppressives? That we are all hesitant to treat. And then the examination of pediatric age group is so difficult, and you have to take him or take her for a GA examination. Again, availability of B scan also may not be suffice, because uh, in traumatic cases to do B scan in a child is also not easy. And even CT scan or MRI, again you require anesthetist to sedate the child or give anesthesia. So that way pediatric trauma is much more cumbersome, much more difficult, and I personally feel requires very much specialized care, evaluation and treatment. I don't know what the other panelists feel about that. So, but to me, it is a very big challenge.
No, you have absolutely brought out the crack nut of this problem. It's not only handling the evaluation, particular the surgical approach and subsequent management. Because ultimately we want that after any management there should be the visual rehabilitation, and that remains at the that crucial part remains always challenged threatened of amblyopia and improper, inadequate post-operative follow-up. You have spoken very well on sympathetic ophthalmitis. How many cases of sympathetic ophthalmitis you have seen in last a decade or so? Before that, I confess that I saw the last case of sympathetic ophthalmitis somewhere in 1995. After that, I have not seen. So others also may be having experience on this. And as you have rightly brought out that indication of enucleation is not there. So other than enucleation and tissue restoration, the respect to the iris and other tissue, what is your comment on this?
Sir, I have also not seen a single case of sympathetic ophthalmitis as such. Yes, I have seen one or two cases who are being followed up in a premier institute and they had come for follow-up. Otherwise, you are absolutely right. In the past 30 years, we have not seen a single case of a new who has come to us, either in the institute, sir. But yes, regarding management of sympathetic ophthalmitis also, sir, yes, our experience is very limited, but that's what I tried to bring out earlier also, that even if we get a case of sympathetic ophthalmitis, the management also becomes slightly difficult, whether we want to start IV steroids and immunosuppressives in a young child and carry out all the hepatic or renal function tests done. So it requires a team approach, and already the parents, I, what to my knowledge, especially nowadays, I've seen it's in the when there is a loss of child or death of child or loss of eye in a child, the parents are the most agitated. So we have to be very difficult. We have to be very careful in managing such cases. That's all I feel, sir.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. And the most important thing which we have brought out is the affected accommodation and watering. It's a very in a eye which is not traumatized. It's a very important observations which we should keep in mind. And definitely the sympathetic ophthalmitis is reduced because of better understanding then availability of steroids and other surgical management strategies, microscopic surgeries, all those are positive factors. And we have Sanjay, is a good pediatric ophthalmologist. And what would you like to comment on use of IUL in pediatric age group below 8 years? Sanjay?
Sir.
Yeah,
Sir.
please mute here.
Sir, although the criteria for implantation of IOL now has been that the axial length should be more than 17 and corneal diameter should be more than 10 millimeter. But my personal thought is that we should avoid IOL less than 1 year, sir, at least. Because
Yeah,
according to the IATS also, sir, the duration which they have taken into study is 7 months, sir. So they have found higher complications like secondary glaucoma and other things in this population. Although the study has been done in age group till 7 months, but it can be interpolated to 1 year. And although the now current practice is this 17 millimeter and 10 millimeter corneal diameter, sir. And above 1 year. And above 1 year, we can see, sir, then whether it is a bilateral or a unilateral cataract or a ocular injury involving the lens material. So if it is a uniocular injury or a unilateral cataract, then we can think of putting the IOL, keeping other things in mind, sir.
Yeah,
suppose it is a bilateral cataract or bilateral injury, sir.
What about IUL power calculation? Should we go with the hyperopic shift?
Sir.
In the age group below 6 years
Sir,
or
now
so?
that has also come to. Sir, now there's also been two school of thoughts nowadays regarding that. One is that the child should be made emmetropic and should be followed up for refraction, and the corrective glasses should be given to the child so that there is less of the amblyopia doesn't develop, sir. Second thought is that we should make the child slightly hyperopic, and so that the myopic shift becomes lesser. So both thoughts are there, sir. So it's up to the operating surgeon.
And
but I would like to keep the child slightly undercorrected, sir.
Yeah, because there is always a myopic shift, and the lens as much as possible should be in the bag only. And
yes, sir,
multifocal lenses to be avoided in early pediatric age group. After 10 or 12 years of the after 10 years of the age, you can use it, but not before that. Bride Puninder, one thing I missed it from you, that is regarding this posterior capsulorhexis and anterior vitrectomy in pediatric age group. Should we do it or not? Because I feel that vitreous is such an important thing. We should respect vitreous, and little bit fiddling is not correct, which may lead to the fibrosis. What is your opinion?
I think, sir, all of us, in fact, most of us do posterior capsulorhexis as well as anterior vitrectomy, especially in a small child, even if he is less than 3, 4, 5 years, because rate of PCO is almost 100%. And to do YAG capsulotomy in a small child is not easy. So most of us are doing, and with the 27 gauge vitrectomy, 25 gauge vitrectomy, it is a relatively simple procedure to do sutureless vitrectomy in a pediatric cataract also. So I feel with advancement in technology, vitrectomy and posterior capsulotomy has become much easier, sir.
It gives less inflammation and traction on the vitreoretinal base, is it?
Yes, sir. And with cuts coming 7,000, 10,000, it is absolutely in order.
Because this is one of the most controversial and hot topic, sir. To do it or not to do it, pros and cons. So I go with you as usual. Sir. Professor Jaya, would you like to add anything? Since it is your instruction course, sorry, I hijacked it in panel discussion. And the Piyush is left to comment.
Sir. Another thing I would like to discuss is one point, like while doing primary repair, should we address to other injuries or not? So I would like to ask Dr. Piyush, what is his opinion about it? Like,
Yeah, as far as the other injuries, like critical injuries, which I have brought out in my presentation, like head and neck injuries and airway injuries, definitely they have to be deliberately looked into. Moreover, in the first slide, that I have just brought out the four-pronged approach in which there was an visual observation, because in a child we don't have that much time, and the time is ticking. As far as the chemical injury per se, if I was talking about, so in the same scenario or the setting, you will have to look for the other signs also, which may or should be tackled immediately if they are life threatening. As far as lid and other abnormalities or injuries are concerned, definitely they can be left for the later if they are not of a very severe grade. However, in particular, if I am absence, I was presenting the chemical injuries. As far as chemical injuries is concerned, the time duration is in seconds. It is like it has to be implemented within 60 seconds, which many of the publication have said ki it does play a role within few minutes only. However, in majority of the cases we have seen, they will the child will generally come to us at a later stage. However, if they have been seen in early stage and they have got other associated injuries, life threatening has to be immediately tackled. Other like washing, irrigation, those have to be immediately taken, and majority of these two can be tackled simultaneously, provided we have a pediatrician, pediatric anesthetist, or critical care anesthetist available with us in the scenario where airway and other injuries are concerned.
I think we
Right.
had a good discussion.
thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Dr. Jaya Kaushik, if you have some concluding notes, please.
I would like to thank my all the co-instructors, Brigadier Puninder sir, General Parihar sir, everyone in the team. For thanks to every one of you for your lucid presentation. I would like to conclude the instruction course. Thank you, Doctor.